Good morning. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Good afternoon to everyone joining us from Pakistan. Good morning to everyone joining us from Romania. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really important, but also it's good to reflect on the situation that has happened and how things are progressing, because the speed with which they're progressing, it's sort of unprecedented. I don't think anyone had really predicted that the situation would change so much and so fast. And with the recent events, with the announcement of a government, it was met with disappointment, and it was at odds with the earlier statements of the Taliban and assurances to the international community that they would form a broad-based government. It has been described as a caretaker arrangement that keeps the door open to later expansion by accommodating others. And it is at the start of their rule that the Taliban needed to demonstrate to the world that they were willing to depart from the past. And if they had included non-Taliban members from minorities and women, they may have been able to change the international conversation and perception. The international community has a shared interest in Afghanistan's stability, and they have offered assistance to address the humanitarian crisis. But beyond the humanitarian help, the international community remains apprehensive about the country's future. And there are common concerns about the stability and the need for the Taliban to abide by their commitments to counterterrorism and to respect human rights. While the US was the prime mover and decided the strategy of Western intervention in Afghanistan, several European countries have made big investments of troops and resources in this effort. And now they must consider the lessons of the Afghan experience for their policies on security or stabilization, or even relations with the US and other regional powers. It is important to discuss what the Taliban's takeover means for Europe and the rest of the world and the major partners, because the withdrawal from Afghanistan is likely to have both immediate and long-term effects on Europe, NATO, and even transatlantic relations. So, related to this, we have a very experienced and a very prolific panel with us today. So I'm not going to take up too much time, and I'm going to be handing over the floor to Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, President IRS, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Zonera. I'm not going to add much to what Zonera has just said. There are only a few things which I want to just flag, and then the discussion can start, because we've got a real eminent panel of speakers available with us today. I guess that there is a lot of criticism, just like Zonera said, that the interim government which has been announced by the Taliban,
Team? Da.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I said that the interim government, which has been announced by the Taliban, it appears that it appears to be that of hardliners. And because of that, there is a great amount of apprehensions everywhere in the region, as well as beyond, in Europe and the United States. But I think one of the things which is important, that the world must give the Taliban some time, because I think it has to be wait and see, because you have to realize something, that it's their country. It's a country which has gone through a lot in the last 40 years or more, and they have to devise a system by which they can govern it. So when I look at Afghanistan, I look at it that one should not jump to conclusions. One should wait and see, and then come across with the various options which countries have. Saying all that, I think one real important thing which we have to consider is the Afghan people. The humanitarian aspect, what is the food situation over there? And now with the winters just around the corner, one has to see that, what future holds for the Afghan general public. So with these brief comments, I feel that we need to give at least the Taliban more time so that they can put forward whatever plans they have for the rebuilding and the reconstruction of Afghanistan. So with these brief comments, Zunaira, it's back to you, and I'll be very keenly listening to the panelists, and then I hope we can have a very interactive discussion in the question answer session. Thank you everyone for being on board.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Nadeem, for your comments. We are going to be moving straight to the panelists so that we can get, we can listen to their opinions and their expertise. Our first speaker is going to be Dr. SALMA Malik, who is an assistant professor at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. And the topic that she's going to be covering is Afghanistan through the decades. So Dr. SALMA, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Zunaira. That was kind of jumping the gun. I was expecting the big wigs to be speaking first, but thank you so much, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz Saab, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this August forum and to interact with our Romanian colleagues. Welcome on board. What I'm going to look at, because we have Ambassador ASIF DURRANI as well, who is very well versed with Afghan affairs, and he's going to focus much deeply on that. I'll try and have kind of a gender perspective blended into what the Afghan scenario is. And Zunaira, how much time do I have? If you can kindly flash the time. Do we have 5 to 7 minutes?
Yes, you have 7 to 10 minutes, so you can go up till 10.
Okay, thank you so much, Zunaira. Okay, so starting from now, when we look at Afghanistan, I think nowadays the way those things are unfolding in Afghanistan, each and every one of us has become much of an expert at what is happening. And the conversation around human security, how humanitarian concerns are all about, are something that are becoming more of a buzzword that is going around. But if we go back retrospectively and we look at how the Afghan saga has unfolded, it's an unfortunately tragic state of affairs, where for very long decades, Afghanistan has not seen complete peace and stability. In fact, quoting from one of my colleagues' words, who was looking at what one of the British Prime Ministers, Benjamin Disraeli, once pointed out, where he said that Afghan affairs are too troublesome to be, Afghanistan is too troublesome to be annexed and too dangerous to be ignored. So Afghanistan has somewhat been a state or a political space, if one would say, before the construct of the nation state as such, where there was much of tribalism, people, very independent-minded people, with whom this myth of never being conquered or vanquished could be very much attached to. And the fact that these were a very ferociously independent people who managed to survive all type of colonial or neo-colonial impacts on them, which made Afghanistan or Afghans somewhat an invincible force to reckon with. However, the very fact that has helped Afghanistan in all these long troublesome decades is that it has a very treacherous topography and a geography, and that has come much to its aid, plus the fact that Afghans, despite the different shades and flavors that Afghanistan represents, come across as a very, very united place whenever there is an external threat that kind of impacts this particular nation state. Since Ahmad Shah Abdali's claiming of this place as a common zone, Afghanistan moving from a nameless and a borderless political entity to a well-knit entity that emerged more so under the contemporary rulers such as Zahir Shah and others, we have seen that Afghanistan has faced a lot of conflict of different shades, whether it was tribal conflict, whether it was reforms that were being brought forward by Zahir Shah, prior to that Amir Abdur Rahman a century back, or it were efforts by the PDPA, different shades of the PDPA, and then the Soviet invasion. So there have been this meta-narrative of Afghanistan as a very troubled area. But what is happening on the gender side? Although my colleague from Afghanistan, Muhtarma HASSINA SYED, is much well-versed in talking about the internal dynamics of Afghanistan, even from the gender perspective. But from this matter narrative, the biggest thing that has been missing is where you place the human security concerns. And unfortunately, the conversation, the narrative around the human security emerged more so after the 9/11 incident, and the fact that Afghanistan had to be reclaimed as a new space, a new norm had to be somewhat ushered into that country, because Afghanistan had failed grievously on the human security and governance indicators. And one of the biggest grievances the Taliban 1.0 at that time faced from the rest of the Western world, of course, was their performance on governance, on human rights, and more so on women rights and women issues. The Bamiyan Buddha's fall, the summary executions that were brought forward by the Taliban regime, and so many other things made them extremely unpopular with the international community. And any country that was contemplating recognizing the Taliban, the initial Taliban regime at that time between 96 to 2001, had different thought after that, and no one recognized them. But for 3 select countries, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, that recognized Taliban, and then later on, those dynamics also changed. So fast forwarding it to a post 9/11 situation where you had the Western world entering into Afghanistan, especially on the card that they wanted to liberate the Afghan women. They wanted to help the Afghan women find their feet, and they wanted Afghanistan to start governing on contemporary political and social order. We see that a bubble was created in the last 20 years where a lot of Afghans with a lot of promise came back to their country to make that dream come true. And they invested a lot of human capital in that country. Young women, Western educated, who were not even born when Soviet fall of Afghanistan occurred, came back to their country and they performed. And everyone performed very well. But where did this picture start going wrong? The picture started going wrong when even the indigenous Afghans, they would say that there has not been a grassroots strengthening and empowerment of the Afghan society. And unless and until there's a grassroots empowerment of Afghan society, this picture is going to remain flawed. And tomorrow when there's a Western pullout, it is not going to work. The second thing that went wrong, because we have limited time and we have a lot of speakers here, the second thing which everyone is now openly talking about went wrong was how the Afghan national security forces were brought up, were propped up, and how weakened they remain. To such an extent that today, when the Taliban 2.0 has happened and the Taliban has taken over, I would actually say that this is not exactly a Taliban's victory, but this was the failure of the previous regime or the sitting regime in Afghanistan, and also the failure of the Afghan national security apparatus, where they could not even put up an hour's worth of resistance against a coming militia force, which they considered formidable. So technically, the Taliban really didn't have to fight to gain a victory. They just marched in without any resistance. And there was not even a token resistance. The only token resistance the Taliban faced was when they marched into Panjshir towards the end of their march. And there we had the Ahmad Massoud's forces along with some other Panjshiri forces putting up a token resistance for a day and a half. And then that also somewhat became a thing of the past. But the very fact is that given the fact that there was very little governance, grassroots governance, deep-rooted governance that took place. The second factor, that the Afghan national security apparatus, in which the national security forces, judicial forces, the law enforcement agencies, all of them are clubbed together, were not adequately prepared in these last 20 years, and there were a lot of red flags that were raised not only by the Afghans, friends of Afghans, but even by the Americans themselves. The cigar reports are one of the most talked about reports as an evidence that are there. The Australian forces are talking about it. The British High Command is talking about it, that the Afghan National Security Forces were not prepared. The third factor that unfortunately eroded Afghanistan to a greater extent in these 20 plus years was the massive corruption in the governance apparatus. And that again is something that we have seen, where unfortunately the high level politicians fled the country with money and so many other things, which again makes Afghan exchequer a very poor exchequer, and there's very little left for the Afghans to look into. Now, fast tracking it all to today, what happens today? What technically happens today is that we are now facing a very severe humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan. There's a human crisis that is brewing up. The Taliban, as Ambassador Nadeem Riaz has also pointed out, where we are talking about an inclusive government, the Taliban will not go for inclusive government primarily for the fact that they are the victors. They're the ones who own the day-to-day. And unfortunately, it's not in the nature of the beast to go for such a situation. Even if there is an inclusive government, it entirely depends on how much empowerment that inclusive government partners would have in such a setup. So that also depends. With the 33 heavy cabinet, one can see the type of flavor this inclusive setup might end up having, even if we go for the name of inclusivity here. The second factor is that Taliban's performance, although they have been very measured, they have given the right signals to the world, they have still conducted several things which are not being taken very well by the people. Firing in the air whenever there were any women protest, the fourth women protest that took place, then torturing and detaining the journalist, and several other things. These are the things which are going to be highlighted by the international community, and they're going to be used against the Taliban. The unfortunate fallout of this entire scenario is going to be the Afghan people. They don't have any money left with them, despite the pledge of the 1 billion, the aid money that is going to come to Afghanistan. How fast that aid money reaches people. The hospitals are now on less than 1 week's supply on medicines, on any type of facilities that are available to people. People are fast running out of cash. People are fast running out of food with winters approaching, and Afghan winters are extremely harsh. Women are being asked to go back to colleges and several other places, but the fact is that they are being discouraged from going to workplaces. If they are the sole bread earners, how are they going to earn for their families? The Taliban's least priority at this moment is governance and social order. For the moment, their priority is a military order plus a political order. And in this, the humanitarian concern becomes one of the least priority areas for the moment. And if this continues, it is going to become a major catastrophe for the people. And unfortunately, if the Taliban's earlier words of moderate and inclusivity of social order does not remain there, as they were talking about when they were in Doha, and that does not translate on the ground, then there's going to be a flight of people. There is already a big flight of people, but that is going to become manyfold. And that flight of people is going to drastically impact, and Zunaira, I'm on my last minute, so I'm going to stop in a while. And that flight of people is drastically going to impact the neighboring countries, mainly. Here, I would again and again emphasize, mainly Pakistan. Already, Pakistan is one of those countries which is providing Afghanistan the biggest transit route for people moving to any part of the world. But a situation is fast emerging where there are going to be Afghan nationals who are going to come to Pakistan with nowhere else to go to. And that is going to be a very, very major human disaster, and that is something that we are going to face in the coming days. And in case we want to prevent all of these things from happening, my last word here is that we need to understand the unique dynamics of Afghanistan. We need to incentivize the Taliban to act as responsible actors so that a humanitarian disaster and a human catastrophe is prevented. Thank you very much, Zunaida. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salma. Thank you for sharing your views with us. I would just like to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please send them in the chat box and they will be addressed at the end of the session by the panelists. Moving forward, we have Ms. HASSINA SYED with us, who is an Afghan entrepreneur and a political activist, and she will be addressing the present situation in Afghanistan. Ms. HASSINA, you have the floor now.
Thank you for having me and good morning. Right now, the situation in Afghanistan, I think everybody knows that I call it critical, I call it very delicate, and so much confusion. Everybody doesn't, people of Afghanistan, they don't know what's going to be happen next. So that's why everybody is, they don't think about the future, what will happen to my future. So that's also the situation which we are right now, we are in, is a bit scary. So that's why people always, when they call me, they just try to get out, just to have some space so they can think about, just like me, I am here just to think what will be the future. Will Taliban will stand on their promises? Whatever, especially for women. And regarding the work-wise, of course, there is a lot of financial problem right now in Afghanistan, and people they don't have no food, no job, and especially the schooling. How people can go to school with empty stomach? Has Ambassador Nadeem just mentioned that we really need to give Taliban some time. I always say that we really, because they haven't made their cabinet properly yet. So how they will think about the future, and also the regarding the schooling, regarding the universities, whatever is happening right now, the people who was wearing hijab. I think I call it, it's not whole Taliban mentalities like that. It's just maybe some of the people who might be Wahhabi, because there is so many now Taliban with different mentality, with their own religious. So we don't know what type of Taliban will take what type of which area of Afghanistan. So that's the scary part first, and the second is the regarding the financial issue and humanitarian aid. Just like Dr. Salma mentioned, that the Afghanistan really need humanitarian aid right now, because if the Taliban, they want to negotiate with them, but what about the people of Afghanistan? What about the children? What about the people who doesn't have food to eat? So right now we have to emphasize again and again on international community that please do not stop your humanitarian aid, because Afghan people really need that support from you, because right now the damage has been done. Let's see what's happened next. What will happen next? And the damage, whatever is happened, is not only because of Afghanistan. Afghanistan was fighting because of the war of so many other countries. And so we can't only blame Afghan people. I said that Afghanistan is the heart of Asia. If you just if you just don't care about this heart, it can ruin other countries. And this crisis in Afghanistan, whatever is happening right now, is not only going to end in Afghanistan. It can go to further, even in our neighboring countries, not only to Pakistan or to Iran. it's definitely is going to Asia, to other further, especially Europe country, to Italy, to a lot of migrant people will go outside. So we have to be very careful about what decision we are going to make for Afghanistan. So these are the very main and focus point of Afghanistan right now, especially the women issues. We have to emphasize, we have to, whenever we give aid or whenever from the next step for Afghanistan, whoever make any kind of decision for Afghanistan, we have to think that what will happen to women, because women issue, we have to take this time very seriously. We shouldn't ignore it. We have to, just like in Karzai's time, in 2001, Karzai even didn't want to have no cabinet for women in Afghanistan, but it was international community who said that we will give you aid that time, or we will support financially that time when you give some cabinet ministries to the women, or cabinet some kind of if you recognize women. So they have, so he has given 32 or 30 seats for women in Afghanistan, and in the way of exchange of getting funds from the international community. So we can do with the same thing with the Taliban, because without women it's impossible that any country, not even Afghanistan, any country can run their country properly. This is the fact. And I don't want to go to this woman issue right now, because later on I will definitely talk about it. But right now the situation in Afghanistan, whatever people are telling me, and I saw it myself and calling me, is the same financial issue, is the same security issue, the same thing. Everybody doesn't know. Some area Talibans are behaving good, they are happy about it. Some areas they are complaining. So that's why has the Taliban, as I mentioned before, that the Taliban are in a separate group. They have different mentality. So there is not a proper government right now in Afghanistan. Nobody doesn't know who will be my boss. So we have to give them time. The important thing is that we need to give them time. We need to give them more space, and also they need some humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hassina, and thank you for giving such a personal and such an encompassing viewpoint to us. And I'm sure we've all learned a lot from hearing from an Afghan, you know, your own personal views and experiences. Moving forward, our next speaker is Dr. DRAGOS MATEESCU from the Romanian Diplomatic Institute, and he is going to be addressing the EU and the Taliban's Afghanistan. Sir, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be very short, outlining what has happened on the EU side recently. First of all, the EU monitors in a very complex format the situation. The overall format is called Migration Preparedness and Crisis Blueprint Network on Afghanistan. Sorry for the long term, but that's how it works in the EU. They are preparing this, let's call it network, okay, the EU network. It's very important, the word, though, because it networks with a lot of other institutions. And there have been regular meetings already in September, 2 of them, one on the 2nd of September, another one on the 8th of September. Each of them end with conclusions, which the European Commission issues. But behind this is collaboration, exchange of information with the European External Action Service, including representations not only in Kabul, which, by the way, still exists. There is EU representation through the External Action Service in Kabul, but also in Ankara and Tajikistan. In part of this network is also Frontex, humanitarian agencies, including a fundamental rights agency of the EU. FRA is the acronym for that. There is cooperation with Europol. So to initiate contingency plans for the moment if a massive flux of immigrants come from Afghanistan to the European Union countries. There is preparedness on the ground in what concerns contingency plans for armed forces in countries on the border of eastern border of the EU, being prepared to supplement Frontex. And we know about Bulgaria having such contingency plans, and Greece, the two countries, especially Greece, having had the experience with the refugees following the humanitarian crisis in Iraq and Syria. Also, there is collaboration within this network of the EU with the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the UN, with the International Organization for Migration. Recently, they initiated a flash appeal for funding. There is hope for, or the call is for over $600 million. And there is a UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, which actually also participates in coordinating this effort. Also, the EU has been paying for a fence being built. It's actually already almost done in Turkey. And other than that, as Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador Nadim Riyaz said, it's a wait and see situation in which information is gathered. That's right now, I agree, the best option. However, I must add here that I'm a Turkey and Eastern Mediterranean specialist at the Romanian Diplomatic Institute. It is from this position that I have to draw attention to possible weak points, because the main trajectory of refugee flux has been toward the west through, of course, Iran, and then Turkey, and then the Aegean Sea. The main route is Turkey, Italy. Recently, there have been observed an intensification of flights, intra-EU flights in the Schengen area, with more and more Afghan people with papers that go through airports. So with everything in order, but an increase in numbers, and we are talking at this moment only in terms of thousands, especially from Greece to Germany, and to Italy, that horizontal flux, it's only 10% at this moment that we talk about Afghans of the entire flux of refugees, east-west, but growing, steadily growing. As what concerns Turkey, again, EU has been paying for this fence to be done. President Erdogan is asking for more money. Today, he launched that appeal for more money to be given to countries neighboring Afghanistan. And the appeal was made in particular to the EU. My concern as a specialist of Turkey is that the current regime in Ankara has not been very good manager of Turkish economy, which is in trouble right now. In what concerns the refugees, has created problems in time, and the population, because I lived for 20 years there, the population is increasingly irritated, first of all from Iraq and Syria, but those are Arabs mainly, or even from Yemen and from North Africa. Those are Arabs mainly, and there is a history of interaction between the Turkish people and Arab people, while the Afghans are really foreign from all points of view. I'm glad Ms. HASSINA SYED mentioned the Wahhabi element in the Taliban. That element is extremely sensitive also in what concerns internal Turkish politics, because Mr. Erdogan, Mr. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, at a given moment, just 3-4 weeks ago, mentioned some sort of affinity, ideological affinity, ideological closeness between the Turkish regime and the Taliban. And that irritated terribly the Turkish population, which is increasingly irritated in general with the policies of the government. My point is that fear is that an influx of Afghan refugees into Turkey could lead to the destabilization of Turkey, and that could lead to a way of no return and create an even a bigger problem. In my opinion, the EU's role here is extremely important, not to cut communication with the Taliban, not to cut communication with the Turkish government, continue to finance on a very clear basis some sort of accommodation of possible refugees in Turkey and other neighboring countries of Afghanistan to the west. In the long term, even today, Jose Borrell, the High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Foreign and External Affairs of the EU, underlined, first of all, with the Taliban's engagement has to be preserved. He explained what there is envisaged, including on reforms on human rights, on women's rights, to help the creation of a more inclusive government, and on that basis to also provide aid to the Taliban administration. But the big question mark for everyone is, of course, whether the Taliban would be able to go beyond this interim situation and actually administer that country and actually be a partner in concrete policies with the international community, because all speakers up to now underline funds simply don't exist. The financial aspect is crucial. So I hope I gave a few basic ideas about what happens on the European Union side, with contingency plans, first of all, being ready, and wait and see. Wait and see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. MATEESCU. Thank you for sharing your views. Now, for the topic of future projections, I will be asking Ambassador ASIF DURRANI, who currently is serving as a senior research fellow at Islamabad Policy Research Institute. Sir, please take the floor and share your opinion.
Thank you, Zunaira. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Well, thank you, Zunaira. Thank you. And thank you, Ambassador Nadim Riaz, for organizing such an important activity on Afghanistan. There have been hosts of webinars and roundtables going on right now on the developments in Afghanistan. And one is at a loss that how much repetition one has to do in these activities. But my foremost, I should say, the preface of my argument would be that right now, future in Afghanistan is bleak. I wish I prove wrong, but for the time being, the future is bleak. Unless there are certain conditions which are met, and again, those are doubtful. And when the doubt is there, and when those who have to contribute to the stability of Afghanistan, if they put up certain conditions, it means that the very aspect of development or stability or progress also becomes doubtful. At the political level, Dr. SALMA MALIK has already given a very detailed view and very impressive view. And if I quote her, she has said that it was not the Taliban victory, but the failure of the previous regime, and which now you see that now reams of articles in the newspapers and in television discussions you are looking for. But from 15 August last month till the 9th of 11, everything was honky-dory. When the United States-led dispensation entered Afghanistan, everything looked so bright and so promising that no one ever looked at that what kind of a dispensation the United States has paratrooped in Afghanistan that it could not sustain despite 20 years. Now, I think there will be more questions rather than answers about Afghanistan, especially for these 20 years. Before 9/11, we all are aware what happened, what mistakes were committed, and how those mistakes led to the death and destruction in Afghanistan. But once the United States entered the fray, one had expected that at least at the political level, there will be a fair play. At the economic level, there will be justice. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And now if we are writing truth about those failures, then we are only contributing to the history. We are not contributing to the present of Afghanistan, which again looks bleak. So whatever historical data we have now about Afghanistan gives us no hope that there could be a brighter future in Afghanistan in the coming weeks, months, or years. Why I say that? That that Taliban entered Afghanistan without firing a single shot, in Kabul. And once they entered Kabul, they were also surprised. In fact, they were surprised to the level of shock that how to manage things. And another big question which comes to mind is that what kind of a government it was till 14th of August that now everything you talk about Afghanistan, they say the coffers are empty. There is no money left. When you talk about any institution, they say nothing is left. And when you talk about running the government or political aspects, then you think that everything is uncertain. Even now that Taliban have established a cabinet, they have formed a cabinet, a 33-member cabinet, out of which only 2 are Tajiks and 1 is a Uzbek, and the remaining are Pashtuns. Now, problem is that this inclusiveness aspect was given by the West that the future cabinet should be inclusive. Now, on this term inclusiveness, there is a controversy that the definition given by the West is different than what Taliban are interpreting the inclusiveness. For the West, it is the opposition which has to be part of the future cabinet. And Taliban say our inclusiveness is that those who had joined the Taliban movement from different ethnic and religious minority groups, they will be the part of the inclusiveness. And more than that, the question is how history repeats. When these same Taliban wanted to join and first to sign the surrender document in 2002 and then join the future dispensation, the United States was so arrogant that it simply summarily refused and turned down that offer. Now the same United States is demanding inclusiveness, while on their time, in 2002, they were averse to the idea of inclusiveness. So history is repeating itself, and unfortunately, this is not something which is pleasant to talk about. Now, next aspect is when I say about the uncertainty is this political uncertainty after the success of Taliban is going to lead to economic uncertainty. And that's how, when you look at the economic conditions, and if there is a demand from the international community to give, to secure human rights, especially the women's rights, the main question arises that if the government is unable to pay the salaries, of which in any government, the bulk are the teachers. The bulk are the medical personnel who have to manage hospitals and dispensaries. So you can see that almost 70 to 75% of the government servants form in any government, including in Afghanistan, are the teachers and the medical staff. So, and now at the same time, you're demanding the human rights and then the rights of the women to work, of which the bulk of the women are in the teaching profession. So what kind of humanitarian assistance would that be? Or what kind of that demand would be about the human rights? Right now, the problem is that even you cannot secure the lives of those women and children who are suffering in Afghanistan. What to talk of imparting education to those children, including girls. So these are the uncertainties which have been created by the international community led by the United States, and that needs serious answers. And more importantly, yesterday, under the umbrella of the United Nations, $1 billion worth of humanitarian assistance was pledged, including $64 million by the United States. This humanitarian assistance, and this is going to the international humanitarian agencies. This assistance would last only by the end of this year, which means another 3.5 months. What will happen subsequently? Taliban cannot plan because there is nothing in their hands, and then the international community is still skeptical, and they think that the Taliban have to open the schools. And if Taliban don't have the money to run the schools, there is no sense. So where do we stand? So again, it is uncertainty as well as humanitarian disaster, which is looking, and they are interconnecting, and they are, alternating each other. So this needs to be looked into, and what has to be done. In my view, again, the situation can be retrieved. And that is that in emergencies like famine, drought, or others, so the governments or international community, they put aside their demands, which are political, and they rush to the humanitarian assistance. So I think same can be done, and which has been done in a piecemeal yesterday by the donor agencies and the donor countries. So this is a positive step. We should take it in its stride. Second step could be that the Taliban should commit that the money which will be spent would be available for international audit. And I think based on that, the future allocations should be made. Mind you, that during the past 20 years, almost 80% of Afghanistan's budget was funded by the United States and its EU partners. And if that is going to be the situation, so you can very well imagine that how the future dispensation in Afghanistan is going to be run. Forget about the political dispensation, whether these are the Taliban and they are theocratic, and the previous one were Democrats. If that is the case, then I suggest you should read an article by Farah Stockman on 13th September in the New York Times, in which I just put one quote that one quote, and I quote her, quote, "Corruption was not a design flaw in the war. It was a design feature. We did not topple the Taliban. We paid warlords bags of cash to do it." So this is the situation we are facing. And then I also refer to you to please read Sarah Chai's article in the Foreign Affairs. Again, it says, and the heading of that article is Afghanistan's corruption was made in America. If you read these two articles, and incidentally, both are Americans, and now they are writing about that. So the democratic order which they set up, and they flaunted the success of that democratic order in Afghanistan, in a conservative tribal society, then I think something is flawed either in our understanding of the politics, international politics, or perhaps they thought the Afghans, their minds are underdeveloped. One fails to understand. So I think I will end here by saying that Afghans have all the capabilities to be on their feet, especially when now we know that Afghanistan is sitting on minimum $1 trillion worth of rare minerals. And it could be next Saudi Arabia as far as its resources are concerned. Then I think the world should also open its eyes that you have to make common causes with the dispensation, whosoever is right now in Kabul, to deal with them as you dealt with Iran 40 years ago when they also established the theocratic order. The buzzword is engagement, because through engagements you can influence your interlocutors. Without engagement, you can only breed confrontation. Thank you very much. I'll be ready to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Durrani, for your views. The last speaker for today is Dr. Yulian FOTA, who is the Director General of the Romanian Diplomatic Institute, and he will be talking about the West and NATO after the fall of Kabul. Dr. FOTA, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to our Pakistani friends. Good morning to our Romanian participants. On behalf of the Romanian Diplomatic Institute, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude, for His Excellency Ambassador Nadim Riaz for preparing this very interesting conversation, this very interesting debate. And also my gratitude goes to our Pakistani colleagues who've done their best to help us to understand the current situation in Afghanistan and the implications for the future. I want to tell you that at this conference, we have participants not only from the Romanian Diplomatic Institute, we have representatives from other Romanian governmental research institutions, people who are looking very closely to what's going on today in international relations. And I think that this significant Romanian participation is a very clear proof of the fact that in Romania, and I would say in EU, we continue to have a lot of interest to what's going on in Afghanistan. From a Western perspective, I think that the geopolitical struggle of the West for Afghanistan is over. But although even in these conditions, the Western countries will continue to pay interest to the situation in Afghanistan, and we will continue to stay in touch with the most important evolutions. And I think yesterday, and my good colleague, Mr. MATEESCU, mentioned that Ambassador Borrell just said in the European Parliament that not only that we are interested in the situation there, but we are looking also in the European Union for a sort of engagement, although there are some conditions, for this European engagement in Afghanistan. So on the other hand, I want to say that, and now again, from a Western perspective, I believe that also over is the era of major military operations in remote countries to try to build them, to try to do nation building, along the liberal way of thinking, and with this fall of Kabul, I think that a 20-year cycle, is ending. And because I just mentioned the fall of Kabul, let me tell you that I think that we should make a distinction between the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was a process and a process taking, you know, a few good years, and the fall of Kabul, the moment which impressed us all, and which is a moment in time. And I think that this moment in time will generate, how to say, will speed up, you know, some processes. And if I have to identify these processes, you know, to be speed up by the fall of Kabul, first of all, I will draw your attention on the intensification in United States of the debate about the future of US foreign and security policy. It's very clear that this 20-year cycle of trying to spread, how to say, democracy and rule of law around the world is losing, you know, the internal power. And I believe that although it's not very clear yet how American foreign policy will look into the future, we will have a different American foreign policy than in the past. The second process, which I believe that will be speed up, is the debate inside the European Union about strategic autonomy and about the future of the transatlantic relationship. It's very clear that I mean, we all knew in the European Union that we are dependent, you know, on American power projection. But I think that with the fall of Kabul, and it was even one more time clear for us in Europe that we depend too much on the Americans, and this dependency, you know, could have a price. You know that the Europeans, you know, think seriously about extending, you know, the deadline after 21st of August, and they got a conclusion that they don't have the logistic and they don't have enough resources to do that. The third debate, which I believe that will be amplified and will be very interesting to follow also this one, is the debate about the decline of the West. And although, and I think that the Western countries will be forced to get into this debate, because Russia and China will use this fall of Kabul as an opportunity to amplify the idea that the West is declining, and that decline is an opportunity for them. And finally, I see a very interesting debate now in the Middle East, because also they had and they have their own concerns about about how solid the US security guarantees are, and the fact that we see today a very interesting pragmatism, you know, when it comes to this new dialogue between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or when it comes to Abraham Accords, you know, is the result of this of their concern that into the future the role played by United States will be much more limited, and maybe also the security guarantees will be not as strong as in the past. So I believe that it's too early, you know, to underline, you know, in what direction all this debate will go on. But I believe that those 4 debates which I presented to you will are part of what can be called, you know, the future of world politics, you know, after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I believe that the answer, you know, to all these concerns are for major interest, not only for Western countries, but also for countries who are surrounding in Afghanistan, and Pakistan is one of them. So because I don't want to speak more than my 10 minutes, that's what I try to underline, you know, in my presentations. I want to say one more. I need 1 more minute just to say a few words about NATO. You know, in a statement recently, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said very clearly that NATO will look very closely to see how the Taliban, you know, make good of their commitments. And when it comes to their commitments, you know, the NATO expectations are that on terrorism, you know, the Taliban not to allow any radical Islamic organizations to use Afghanistan as a safe haven. NATO is very sensitive to the issue of human rights, and already this issue have been addressed by previous speakers. And also the NATO and will like to see the Taliban continuing to offer safe passage, to those who are wishing to leave Afghanistan. So that's my presentation. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. FOTA, for your views. I have a lot of questions that have come in for our panelists, so we'll go straight into the Q&A. The first question is by Professor Kharga from Tribhuvan University, Nepal. His question is for Ambassador DURRANI, and he wanted to ask, what do you think are the security implications for South Asia after the fall of Kabul?
Well, it depends how you look at it. For the time being, I think Afghanistan is peaceful, and so the neighborhood is likely to be peaceful. Yes, there are certain voices raised in India which say that once Taliban are settled down, and then I think that they are going to look at the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. So yes, that is the Indian concern, but I think it is out of place. Reason being that the Kashmiris have launched their own movement, and they have been launching through their own way and as per their own culture. Afghan culture is different than the Kashmiri culture. And in Afghanistan, historically, only 4 decades of Zahir Shah were peaceful, not before that and not afterwards, we all know. But in Kashmir, there has been a passive resistance even during the British time when the Maharaja of Kashmir or the King of Kashmir was ruling that, and there has been a passive resistance. So from that security aspect point of view, overall, for Pakistan, the best thing would be that right now Pakistan has been facing a two-front situation. One is with India and other was Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, in fact, our losses were far bigger than we had 3 wars with India. In Afghanistan, due to Afghanistan-related events in Pakistan, the terrorism, we lost 80,000 people. But with India, we had, I think, even 1/10 of those losses with India in 3 wars. So I think that there has to be, as far as security situation is concerned, that should be, in fact, there's a positive outlook as far as I understand. But if from the Indian side, they have different perspective, but I respect their perspective. This is what I can say.
Thank you, Master DURRANI. Our next question is, it says that it has been mentioned in the conversation that there was a lack of inclusiveness in the Taliban government where the Pashtun are dominant. The question is that, can we consider the current Taliban leading authorities as a threat to the Durrani line? Ms. HASSINA, would you like to answer that question?
Sorry, I couldn't, the internet connection was not good. I couldn't get you.
Sorry, the question is that, can you consider that because the current Taliban government has more Pashtun representation in it, can you consider that as a threat to the Durrani line?
I don't think so. Right now, Durrani line is the issue, because I've been talking with some of the my fellows, and they were thinking that right now Afghanistan development is the matter. is the most talking point. The Duran line, they will look at it later. They think that the Taliban think that, okay, we are Pashtun, but as far as they have different mentality, they want to have friendly relationship with the neighbors, especially with Pakistan. So they and which is good, which the neighbor has to be like friendly with each other, because we have different we have the same culture, we have the same religion, we have everything. So why we have to really think, or the issue should be the border? So first of all, we have to think about the development of Afghanistan, and then we have to think about the Duran line, which is an ongoing issue. It's like unsolvable because everybody has different mentality. And as far as your question is concerned regarding the Pashtun, until now I haven't heard anything about them because of their Pashtun. So they mostly the Tajik were in Afghanistan. Mostly the Tajik people always thought about that there shouldn't be no Duran line. Whenever I talked with the Pashtun fellows, they were really obsessed of the Duran line, which I had also the same concern about. Okay, if any Pashtun will conquer Afghanistan, what will happen to Duran line? But Duran line, in as far as I understand, the Duran line shouldn't be right now the issue of any matter, because the development of Afghanistan should be the matter.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Ms. Hassina. So moving on to the next question. This question is for Dr. IULIAN FOTA. Do you foresee recognition of Afghanistan by the EU countries in the current scenario with the current makeup of the interim government that they've formed?
Not so soon, but a lot will depend how the Taliban will continue to act. The fact that, to be honest, you know, to see Ambassador Borrell, you know, the High Representative, speaking about engagement, it was a little bit of surprise for me. So, can you hear me?
हाँ? आने में अभी वेबिनार करूँ.
Hello. So, may I continue?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So you see,
we can hear you.
Yes, because on the one hand, I see a lot of skepticism in Europe about the Taliban, you know, and their very violent and barbaric past is not, it is still there. On the other hand, I think that EU understand, and the decision makers, they understand very well the need for a little bit more pragmatism in the relations with the Taliban regime. So, speaking about engagement, I think it's already a sort of European investment into a possible different and much better relationship with the Taliban regime, but a lot will depend on how the Taliban will act, you know, in Afghanistan. You know, as I told you, there are very clear expectations from the West, from human rights to a very clear attitude, you know, of the Taliban regime on the issue of terrorism. I mean, so an aspect underlined recently also by the NATO Secretary General, by Mr. Stoltenberg. So we have this possibility, but again, it's too early to tell you something, you know, more precise. We will wait and we will see how the Taliban will react. We understand very well that the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is very serious. And I think that EU and the EU countries, you know, will do whatever they can to help the Afghani, you know. But on the other hand, to talk about the recognition is a little bit too early. Again, the past and the memory, the historic memory of the Taliban from the past, it is still strong in Europe, and we need very clear dates and facts. That memory to how to say, to be put on site.
Thank you, Dr. FOTA. The next question is for Dr. Dragos. So do you foresee friction between EU and Turkey over migration collaborations?
Okay, I just started the microphone. Yes, I think there would be increasingly questions about the stability of Turkey in the future, first of all, not only because of this potential migration wave, but also because of the current situation in Turkey, especially concerning the management of the economy. The potential migration wave from Afghanistan via Turkey could add to instability and even possibly contribute to the start of some sort of disturbance in the country. Now, the current government is, the current regime, I can call it, is struggling for its survival and does depend on the EU funding for dealing with any form of refugee crisis, as it happened up to now. Billions of euros have been poured into humanitarian programs for Turkey. How the current regime, especially through the voice of Mr. Erdogan, behaves toward the EU is transactional, and some analysts call it blackmailing, demanding more money, demanding a furthering of the customs union arrangements and improving customs union arrangements, and also lifting visas for Turkish people. There is that part of the customs union negotiations in exchange for Turkey doing something about refugees. The problem is not only this attitude, the problem is that more and more people doubt that the Turkish regime can actually handle an increase in refugees and a new humanitarian crisis. It's a cat and mice game being played. But now we don't have the European Union from 6 years ago, when the Syrian crisis started, that was ready to provide, to deliver, no matter what. This European Union now is also the European Union that practically suspended accession negotiations with Turkey, is an European Union that is also ready to be transactional too. We will see the terms, but I expect frictions between the two sides to continue. On one side, the European Union less giving and only punctually for specific agencies and programs, and the Turkish side losing more and more legitimacy in relation with the EU for reasons that have to do with domestic politics.
I like to say something on, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I like to say something about your previous, the DRAGOS, what he mentioned before regarding how much money they are spending right now on the walls or secure the walls of the Turkey or something. As far as I'm concerned, I think we shouldn't think about, we shouldn't be concerned about how much money we are spending on the European, their own like walls or creating or some kind of this type of matter. I think right now we have to concentrate what's going to be happen next in Afghanistan and how we can be involved in Afghanistan in a positive manner with the new regime. And because as I think that right now, none of the European or foreign countries can dictate our country in Afghanistan right now, this regime, because we already has defeated so many superpowers. So this is the another defeat which we have done it, and we can't dictate them what to do. We can engage with them only in a positive manner, just like in Second World War, like in Germany, they lost the war, so they couldn't dictate other countries. So the same thing has the history repeat. Now nobody can dictate Afghanistan because fortunately you can say, or whatever sentence you want to put in, we have again defeat the superpower.
Thank you, Ms. Hassina, for your input. The next question is for Dr. Salma Malik. The question is that you mentioned in your presentation about measures that you can take to incentivize the Taliban to act responsibly. So could you give some examples of such measures, and how could you assess their chances of success? And one of the measures obviously would be financial aid, but are there any other measures that can be taken to incentivize them?
Okay, thank you so much, Zanera. Well, you see, the issue about incentivizing the Taliban basically comes from the past experience of the Taliban, that when they were heavily sanctioned by the international community, they reverted to using illicit economy to finance their governmental affairs, which meant that more drugs were being traded and they were being brought out into the international market. So unless and until I'm not saying that countries should rush to legitimize them or they should recognize them or all of that stuff, but incentivizing that you have some kind of a positive reward award attached to every goal post that the Taliban do. For example, if they perform better on women issues, allow women to maintain their jobs. The point that Ambassador ASIF DURRANI was also mentioning, that many women are in the medical services, they're caregivers, there's so many other, they're teachers, they're into that type of profession. If you incentivize women from moving out of the house and earning their livelihood, that is going to give rise to a lot of problem. And in case we allow the Taliban to do what, that they allow women to work, and with that, countries give them more aid. They give them, they provide them with better speaking grounds, with better grounds to stand on. That might actually make the Taliban feel that if they behave better, then the international community is going to recognize them faster. They're going to legitimize them, or at least allow them more maneuvering space. And also let them feel that they are responsible actors. Because one hard thing that I would like to say here is that when the Western international order knew that this is precisely what is going to happen, they should have made enough groundwork, steady groundwork, to prevent any of these actions from taking place. So in case now the Taliban do whatever they do and they're not appreciated at all, rather they're criticized, then they are going to fall back onto their traditional practices, and no one is going to really bother much about it. So I think if countries, instead of criticizing each and everything coming from the Taliban, appreciate even the small steps they're doing, that might actually feel that they are partners in Afghanistan's progress, because they are here to stay. No one is turning them out. There is no alternative available in Afghanistan at the moment. So might as well try and figure out how best to rope in the Taliban into the betters of the world, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salma. The next question is for Ambassador Durrani. The question is that what is Pakistan's position on the potential withdrawal of the major non-NATO ally status? How will this potentially influence the evolution of US-Pakistan relations?
Well, even when we are the major non-NATO ally, I think it has incurred more harm to Pakistan than has done any benefits. For instance, for this non-NATO ally, America from the day one issued a travel advisory for its nationals not to travel to Pakistan. The result was that we have lost close to $150 billion in the opportunity cost. Doing business with Pakistan has become expensive. So in a way, America has already, in an unwritten form, they've issued a kind of a sanction, or they have imposed a sanction against Pakistan. So I don't think we have survived. Either we were the allies of the United States, or we were the most sanctioned ally of the United States. So this is the history of Pakistan-US relationship. So we are certainly not surprised. And I think United States also knows that. Yes.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Vajia Harris. She's asking that, don't you think that the West should understand that Afghanistan has its own culture and will not follow the mindset of the West in dealing with the forms of government and treatment of women? Ms. Hassina, would you like to answer that?
Yes, indeed, Afghanistan has its own culture, has previously, unfortunately, the West has imposed so many different kind of culture and very failed democracy in Afghanistan. That's why this is the result which we are seeing right now. We have the same, we have, I think, very broad-minded culture. We are Muslim, and Muslim has the same culture as in our Prophet, peace be upon him, in his time. Our women were very successful leaders. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, his wife and his daughter was a prominent business ladies and advisors. So it's nothing, it's not about the like we are becoming progress because of foreign culture. We are in our religion, we have this what you call, this thing has given to us that we have to be educated, we have to work, we have a lot of respect in the society. So it's not because of foreign culture has imposed on us. We have in our own religion the same thing, values which we have in our culture. So this Afghan culture has, fortunately, we are broad-minded. We have to go for to get more educated, to get more education, and we have this attitude to go more forward. So this is, yeah, this is our culture.
Thank you. The next question is that, and any of the panelists are free to answer this. Don't Taliban face a dilemma in that if the Taliban pay heed to the world's advice of respecting human rights, democratic values, and an inclusive government, they lose the confidence of the foot soldiers who want a strict form of Sharia? And in case they don't pay heed to the world's advice, they will not get international legitimacy. Would anyone like to comment on that?
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is that the Taliban are facing a dilemma right now that if they start following the human rights, democratic values, and inclusive government that the West is trying to ask them to do, they might lose the confidence of their foot soldiers who want a very strict form of Sharia. And if they don't pay heed to it, they will not get the international legitimacy that they need.
I don't think so. And I don't think that we can demonize the Taliban so much that they are just the savages. Don't think so. I think it's an interpretation. The same interpretation we saw about the Iranian revolution when it took place. And now subsequently the world has reconciled. In the Iran case, they could not do much because Iran had the necessary wherewithal in the form of energy resources which they could sell to the international market. Had Taliban had the same wealth, or Afghanistan had the same wealth, I think the world would still be, interacting with them. It is all a, power play. Even while the Taliban were fighting with the Ashraf Ghani government, or before that, during the past 20 years, it was actually a tussle between the two power centers, and Taliban have succeeded. With regard to ideology, what we talk about the human rights and all that, I think if Afghanistan's human rights are dear to the world or to the Americans, then they should also raise the same concern with Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where worst kind of human rights are being taking place. And then about the Muslims' plight, which they have been facing in India, the kind of discrimination. So I think it is, the political expediency dictates, these kind of statements. Otherwise, I don't find. The moment they have the political stability and economic stability, I think then engagement starts. And at the societal level, whether it is Afghan society or anywhere, if the Taliban kind of dispensation is in power, they'll have to listen. Otherwise, then the kind of simmering unrest which starts in the society becomes have a volcanic effect subsequently because it simmers. So we should address the issues which simmer and address them while they are on the low simmering steam. If they become more hot, then you can have the pressure cooker effect. So I think the societies act like that, not the way we want them to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DURRANI.
I like to a little bit put more my view on it. I think Taliban has to know, because has they need aid and also different kind of support from international community. So they have to obey whatever is, for example, the human rights and the women's rights and other issues. They have to, because right now they have to have some kind of mentality of give and take mentality. So they can't even strict into their own ideology. They shouldn't even say that, okay, whatever we think it should be done, but we need more help and more support from foreign country, for international community. So that's why they have to be a little bit softened on some of the issues, which is very important for international, if they want to reconnect themselves with the other world, because they can't run a country, they can't run Afghanistan alone, because it's impossible for any country to run a nation alone. They have to be connected with other nations if they would like to connect, and they need more help, because Afghanistan needs really financial help right now, support. So that's why they need to be connected with the other countries.
Thank you, Ms. Hassina. The next question is that after the fall of Kabul, we have seen a blame game regarding the 20-year failure in Afghanistan. Don't you think that the entire world or some of the responsible countries were involved in this failure? Then why are they finding scapegoats? Would Dr. FOTA, would you like to answer that?
Look, the blame game is powerful for the moment only in the United States. And we understand easily why, because due to the domestic political turbulences which Americans have for a number of years. I don't see too much blame game in Europe, maybe with a significant exception, which is UK, again, for some domestic political reasons. Otherwise, in what is EU today, I don't see any sort of blame game. And if you take, for instance, Romania, in Romania, I mean, we went to Afghanistan, first of all, because it was our way of demonstrating our solidarity to the Americans when they have been very, how to say, cowardly attacked, 20 years ago by Al-Qaeda. And secondly, we went to Afghanistan to show the Western countries, because at the moment, Romania, it was looking for membership to the NATO, that we are not only a loyal Western country, but also we are able to contribute, to the collective security of the West. And certainly, we went to Afghanistan to try to help the Afghans, for whom we had and still have a lot of sympathy, because also Romania in the past used to be poor and surrounded by stronger international actors. So some elements of the Afghan history are common with ours. I think for those reasons in Romania, for the moment, there are no discussions about the need for Romanians to go into, because the logic, it was quite clear. And as I said publicly many times in Bucharest, at least from the Romanian perspective, I don't consider Afghanistan to be a defeat for us. We went to Afghanistan to, to guarantee our membership to the NATO. That happened, a few years after first Romanian troops arriving in Afghanistan, and that's it. So the blame game for the moment, it is strong, but only in the United States. Again, that's my opinion. And I think that sometimes this blame game, it is encouraged from countries, you know, who have an interest in internal destabilization of the West, you know. It's not an accident, and I said that also during my intervention, that in countries like China or Russia, you know, some narratives, you know, are so strongly promoted, you know, because they try to use this opportunity, at least from soft power perspective, you know, to blur, you know, the image of the West at the global level. But I think that, so I don't know what, we will see how this blame game, you know, will go on in the United States. I guess that we'll lose some of the steam, you know. But again, excepting the US, the blame game is not relevant, you know, in the rest of the West.
I would like to add this, if possible. The blame game will probably go on, in my opinion, until some solutions become visible. The European Union, adding to what I was saying in the beginning, is also trying to build a regional platform. In fact, in the long run, the idea is building a regional platform to intervene in and help in such future cases, and depending on the evolutions in Afghanistan. I think the blame on the United States, not only for Afghanistan's policy, but also for its Iraq policy, before will continue, but it'll be dissipated, diluted in this kind of European, possibly other initiatives at the regional level. They will work as a dilution element, and probably the Americans would try to become less and less visible, however, financing other people's initiatives. That is the only mechanism that would help the dilution of the blame.
I'd like to add a little bit on this blame game on United States. I think it will be not too much fair to just blame United Nations, because I've been interact so much with lots of European embassies. I can tell that personally, that I've been telling all the European Union ambassadors, even go to their embassies, that do not you know, the European Union is also we can blame them, because they've been also corrupted our corrupt government. And I've been telling them all the time that this situation is going on. These are the ground realities. But when you tell so much openly, they don't like to invite you anymore, because they don't want to hear the fact. And even though I myself, you can ask from any of your ambassadors, I've been going to all embassies, knocking their doors from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and I've been telling them what are the ground realities, but they don't want to hear the reality or the fact, because they just want to buy influence in this corrupt government.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hassina, and thank you to all the panelists. But before we leave, we've had a lot of very pertinent points that have been discussed, and I just wanted to know if Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, would you like to give some concluding remarks on everything that has been discussed so far?
Well, thank you, Zanera. It's very difficult to conclude a webinar of this quality where so much has been said by so many speakers, but try to do justice to all what you have said. So I'll be a bit brief, and well, I personally feel that peace in Afghanistan is absolutely imperative, and it is essential for absolutely regional stability. Taliban are a reality, you know, whether you like them or you don't like them, you know, the world has to realize that you actually have to now deal all the regional players, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is China, whether it is Russia, whether it is India, they have their own perspectives and interests in Afghanistan. So one needs to be realistic about all that. The Taliban definitely should be given more time. You have to wait and see. They should not be made a pariah, because if ever happens again, then problems in Afghanistan will multiply. When we talk about the question of recognition, I think, you know, one has to wait and see, and I think that particular thing can be the engagements with the Taliban in Kabul, in my opinion, and I guess what was the general opinion in the webinar, is that they must continue. And when we talk about the blame game, whatever happened in Afghanistan, like, it should not be placed on any one country or a group of countries, because it only vitiates the atmosphere and basically takes the focus away from the actual issue at hand. This catharsis can be done at some later stage. And I think the most important thing is that the Afghan people are very important. And they have a right to their own country, and they must decide what do they want to do in their country. Humanitarian assistance is absolutely imperative. It should be immediate. The Afghans should not face the problems, and food security must be ensured. When we talk about women, I'm sure that if you engage with the Taliban, yes, there can be two opinions about it, that, you have the hardliners and you have the moderates. But I think that, a point can be driven home that women must be made a part of the government, and women must be given some rights. But whenever you talk about that, the world must also realize that, the Afghans have a very rich culture. They have their own way of thinking, and they don't like taking dictation from anyone. That is what history has proven, that, superpowers may have come in, but eventually they had to leave. So you have to give them time, and you have to give them the leverage of what they want to have in their own country. And lastly, I think the world needs to assist Afghanistan, because in today's world, there is no country which can survive or live on its own. So I think if there is one particular message which we can, one liner which we can carry away from this high quality webinar, it is that we all need to hold Afghanistan's hand. And we have to ensure that the people get a quality of life which they deserve. Thank you very much, Zunaira.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Nadeem. Thank you everyone who participated, all the panelists and everyone who's joined us virtually. We're very grateful for your sharing your expertise and your opinions with us. And we look forward to calling you again for different events in the future. I think that Ambassador Nadeem has summed this up perfectly. I don't think I need to add anything more at this point. So thank you once again to the panelists, and hope you have a good day. Khuda Hafiz and goodbye.